Disclaimer, we are filming from our busy studios in Birmingham city centre, and today the weather is doing up UK. It is whack. So you may hear it rain and it may get a little bit noisy, so just be patient with us throughout this episode. Welcome back to the Move With Purpose podcast, and today I'm so excited to be joined by the fabulous Kameese Davis. Cam is a founder, business owner, mother, and formidable trailblazer who's doing incredible things for the haircare industry globally. I'm so excited to have you with me today, Cam.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm honoured to be here.
Today we're going to be talking about all things elevate and how you've elevated in your personal life, career, business, but I want to get to the crust of who Cam is.
Okay.
So before we look at all your incredible ventures, tell me about the earliest memory in your childhood when you knew you were potentially going to be an entrepreneur.
I can't say that happened in my childhood.
Okay.
In terms of knowing I was going to be an entrepreneur, but knowing that I was different.
Right.
That was something that I definitely experienced very early in my childhood. I was always the type of child that would think a little bit differently, think outside the box and be a little bit more solution focused. And that really ostracized me from the rest of the group, especially in the environment that I grew up in. It wasn't something that was necessarily encouraged. So as, you know, early as I can remember as a child, I always felt like I didn't quite fit into the status quo, so to speak, in my environment and where I was born.
And what did that environment look like?
Oh, okay. So I was born in Jamaica. Jamaican girl, St. Catherine's Parish. And I came over to the UK with my mom and brother, who was actually born in the UK, when I was 2 years old. And we were raised, or I was raised in Aston. I don't know if who was watching knows the area of Aston, Birmingham, but it's one of the most disadvantaged wards in Birmingham. There's a lot of underemployment, a lot of undereducation, a lot of marginalisation, and as a result of that, there's also a lot of crime. So, you know, I remember being early teens and witnessing gun crime and witnessing knife crime and witnessing muggings, and that being something that was very normal in the environment that I grew up in. And I think when you're a child and you're raised in that kind of situation and circumstance, you don't realize how unusual and how unnormal that is. So, you know, my mom was very, very protective of me as a child. So there was a lot that I wasn't able to do. So, you know, come, 5 o'clock, I had to be in the house where all the other kids were outside playing. 7 o'clock, I was in bed where all the other kids were outside playing. I think that kind of segregated me a lot from my peers and my environment. As a child, I unfortunately witnessed a lot of domestic violence as well, and I think that, again, in order to remove myself from that circumstance and the turbulence in the household, I would often pull myself away and create and read and write poetry and draw myself into my own little world where I felt safe. Those are kind of very early memories of my childhood. 13 years old when I learned that a friend was shot and killed in the head. He was 15 at the time, so there was a lot for me to contend with.
And
process. And unfortunately, the education system and the youth services at the time didn't have the facilities, didn't have the expertise to help children that were in those kind of circumstances to process exactly what was happening. So I would say that my adolescence and my childhood, there was a lot of good things as well, but there was also a lot to navigate, a lot of challenges.
Would you say you experienced childhood trauma?
Oh, absolutely. And
how did that impact you as you kind of moved into becoming a woman, so to speak?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I would say that it impacted my confidence, self-belief, self-actualization. I had to reteach myself.
Right.
Because my mum had a lot of challenges as well.
Yeah.
She's a phenomenal woman, but she had a lot to contend with. So she wasn't able to teach me how to be the woman I wanted to be. I very much had to do that myself.
And I can really resonate with that. I really only recognised that I had childhood trauma when I was about 22.
Yeah.
And the childhood trauma stemmed from a breakdown in relationship between my mum and my dad.
Yeah.
And seeing them, they won't mind me saying this, but seeing them buck heads and disagree a lot from a young age, and almost having to feel like I had to grow up sooner.
Ooh,
so
yeah. I mean,
as a young woman, I had to be like, you know what, this is childhood trauma, and I need a therapist to navigate what that was.
Yeah. I didn't realise how my trauma was affecting me until I was about 25, 26.
Right.
So prior to that, I think my behaviour was very reminiscent of a young woman who had experienced way too much to process.
Right.
So I remember at 11 seeing my mum covered in blood. Like, covered. There was a lot.
Yeah.
My sibling, my younger sibling, he also has like a really bad physical condition, a really bad illness. So there was a lot of responsibility for me as a child to take care of him and to protect him.
Right.
But I think that definitely ensured that, or helped me to mature a lot quicker, helped me to be a lot more self-sufficient.
Yeah.
I left home at 18.
Wow.
And I was on my own from the age of 18, trying to navigate the world myself as a young woman.
Yeah.
While still trying to process what I was going through, and that resulted in entering into relationships that just were not positive, were very toxic. And then it just came to a point where I entered into a Black Studies program, and I say this all the time, it absolutely changed my life.
Wow.
And it changed my life because for the first time I started to have, and I say this, coin this phrase, I started to have a racial esteem.
Okay.
So I started to really feel a sense of pride for my community and where I belonged as a young woman, as a Black woman, what that looked like, what I was capable of doing. And it changed for me the narrative of Blackness, because prior to that, my narrative of Blackness hadn't been positive.
Right.
One, because of the environment that I was predominantly in, and two, because I hadn't been exposed to our contributions to society. So when we looked at the media, when we looked at how Black people were projected, it was never really in a positive way.
Absolutely.
So that sense of pride and that sense of racial esteem almost indicated to me that, okay, if I belong to this group who have done all of these amazing things in history, then I too have the capacity and the capability to do amazing things.
And how old are you when that shift kind of took place?
25, 26. Yeah.
And you're studying this program, are you at university or?
I am in a community Black history program.
Wow.
Run by the formidable Robin Walker. He's a historian. He wrote a fantastic book called When We Ruled. And the focus wasn't on slavery.
Okay.
Which again, when we looked at Black history, it was slavery, it was Jim Crow, that's all I was told was struggle, right? Struggle. But he exposed me to people like Sheikh Anta Diop, right? Who done the first meddling dosage test, who looked at the contributions that black people had on the Nile Valley in Egypt.
Wow.
He exposed me to Ivan Sertima, who wrote the book, They Came Before Columbus. And it really started me thinking of myself just in a completely different capacity. Completely different space.
Because what was your view of yourself before that? Did your experience have a negative impact on how you embraced you?
Yeah, because although I was very creative, although I used to write poetry and I would like philosophy and all of these things, there was no one to share that with,
right?
If that makes sense. There was no one to bounce ideas off. So when I was going to my cohort community peers and talking about these random things, like, for example, I remember very young, I had this concept of color. This is really weird, right?
Yeah.
But I had this concept of color that everybody's interpretation from the vibrations of color could be significantly different. And I remember going to my peers and saying, like, isn't this amazing? Like, you know. And they were like, what the hell are you on about? You're so stupid. You're so strange. So it made me withdraw.
Right.
If that makes sense. And I questioned my intelligence. I questioned my competence. And as a child, you want to fit in, you want to belong. That's part of the process, right, of growing up, trying to conform to a group where you think you belong. And so I started exhibiting those behaviors to try and fit in.
So you do this study program and you find almost this new lease of life and start to recognize that, wow, I'm coming from a legacy of greatness.
Yeah.
What do you do with that? What does that then evoke in you?
Oh my God. So I just started to read. I just started to read so much. And I changed my appearance drastically. Yeah. Right? So it was no longer weaves. Yeah. And saying nothing negative to say about how people choose to wear their hair. But for me, I wanted my hair in its natural state. Yeah. Changed the music that I listened to. All of a sudden, I started to realize how a lot of the music that we were consuming was negative, was a negative portrayal of who we were. My friendship group changed completely. I found a community of black women that started to think like me, you know, thought like how I was accustomed to thinking was the wrong way of thinking. And I found my tribe. I found where I belong, and I flourished in that. Wow. You know, I flourished. I developed some amazing friendships that I have now. And I just started to flourish in my capacity as a woman. I started to write poetry, all of the things that I would never share with the world. I started to share with the world. Yeah. And I was up and down nationally performing my poetry. And became quite well known on that scene as a poet, as a formidable poet. And then, of course, your confidence just continues to grow and expand. I met my partner through poetry reading. So it was actually, he seen me performing and reached out to me, and, you know, and he's just so amazing. So I contribute a lot of where I am now to that very early choice of going to that Black History course.
So when did that entrepreneurial spark start?
With a need.
Okay.
With a need. My daughter had eczema as a child. I was one of those moms that, and probably every new mom is this way, and I was very kind of over protective of her. I just wanted the absolute best for her. And when she had eczema, because again I've got this kind of mentality where I can get quite fixated on a topic, so I became aware of what was in the environment that was causing aggravation to her skin. And I developed an ingredient consciousness. I started to really scrutinize the labels, what was in the products, and what I was putting on her, trying to identify what was causing the issue.
Yeah.
And then I realized that many of the raw materials, when I was doing my research on them, were really dangerous, like really harmful.
Wow.
And we were talking things that had been linked to cancer, endocrine disruption, skin irritation, and just long-term health complications with prolonged use. And then I started to explore why these raw materials were in the products that we were using. So when we look at it from a cosmetic science perspective, they had inclusion rates for these ingredients, so they can only be included in a product at a rate of, let's say, 0.2%, for example. However, if I'm using a cream with this raw material, then I'm using a toothpaste that's got it in, and then I'm using a shampoo that's got it in, you can quickly see how that starts to accumulate.
Right,
and
how much you consume.
In terms of how much you consume. And the skin as an organ, it absorbs a significant amount of product that's placed on top of it.
Right.
So I just wanted to eradicate her exposure to those things. So I started to look for a natural hair care product. But I couldn't find anything that had been formulated for our hair types.
Right.
Bearing into consideration, again, with both wearing our hair in its natural state. Of course, she's a child. So I wanted something natural, non-toxic. Couldn't find anything. I started importing products in from America. And it was very exciting at first. But after a while, it became unsustainable.
Costly.
It was costly.
Yeah.
It was costly. So I was like, I can't keep this up. And then I remembered, literally, I was like, right, okay, I'm going to do it.
Wow.
And that was it. I had no experience, no knowledge, no experience in the sector whatsoever. But I know, one thing I know about myself is I can learn anything. I really believe that. I can learn. Give me enough hours, give me enough time, I can learn to do it.
So you've got no experience, Cam. But you've got this burning desire to solve a problem for your daughter.
Yeah.
Where do you start?
Where did I start? I started with a list of what I wanted from a product. What did I want? So I looked at, well, first of all, I wanted something non-toxic, right? I wanted something that was healthy. And I wanted something that was specifically designed for Afro-textured hair types. But then I had to understand, okay, why is Afro hair the way it is? So in terms of its structure and its characteristics, what is going on? Why is it different? What does it need? Because I think, again, a lot of the products on the market had been designed for us to change our hair, because the beauty narrative is changing now, which is amazing. But the beauty narrative at the time was that Afro hair was undesirable, it wasn't beautiful, it had to be straightened, it was unmanageable, it was wild, all of these negative connotations. And I wanted to change that. Again, I'd done Black history, and I was proud of my hair, and I wanted to change that narrative. And in order to change that narrative, not just for my daughter, because I really didn't want her to go through the process of unlearning. I had to do that, and it's hard. It's so hard to unlearn something that's engraved in you. I had to unlearn that I wasn't pretty. I had to unlearn that my hair wasn't desirable. I had to unlearn that my skin wasn't beautiful. And that was a process and a journey. And I didn't want, I hate that I cry so much, friggin' hell.
It's fine.
I didn't want my daughter to have to do that. I wanted to see what, and this is what drives me, this is my passion. I'm terrible.
You're great.
I wanted to see what a Black woman would look like who hasn't had trauma.
Yeah, wow.
Do you know? Because most of the black women in my family and in my environment had trauma.
Yeah.
And a lot of us do.
So many.
Unspoken trauma.
Yeah.
And there's a theory called epigenetics. I don't know if you know about that theory, epigenetics. But what it states is that trauma is actually inherited.
Right.
To a certain extent. You can have inherited memories. And things like trauma can be so embedded in your genetics and your DNA that trauma can be passed on to your children, to your offspring. And when we think of things like the fact that segregation, Jim Crow, slavery wasn't that long ago, we're not talking generations and generations, we're like 4 or 5 generations removed. And now they're discovering that actually trauma can impact on people for generations into the future. You can see why a lot of us as black women and as black people still have fears and traumas and ways of thinking that sometimes are unexplainable.
Yeah.
And for my daughter, when I consider and look into the future as the woman I want to kind of help mold her into becoming, I talk about that a lot, my becoming. I wanted her to be as trauma-free as possible.
Wow.
And I can't, of course, prevent that because life is life.
Yeah.
But I can certainly try and ensure that her childhood is stable, that her experiences as a child are not like mine.
Wow.
That she looks at herself and she thinks she's amazing in every possible way. And not in a way that's conceited, but in a way that's just confident and firm in who she is. And then I wanted to, with my brand, I wanted to expand that out. Like, how can I, if this is my mission for my daughter, how can I create that and for it to be a mission that impacts wider than that?
Yeah.
You know?
I'm so blown away because every element of what you're saying I can resonate with. And the point that you made about us not wanting our kids to have the same trauma that we had is everything.
Yeah.
And
God.
I remember being pregnant with my daughter and I sat down with my husband and I said, look, I want us to talk through some of our traumas because the safe space we're going to create for Rain, I want to be free of all of that.
Yeah.
And it meant digging up stuff with my mom, my relationship with my dad, and the healing really took place here before I pushed Rain out because I was so passionate about her not having to experience that strong black woman mentality.
Right.
I'm so tired of that.
I'm so tired of that narrative.
Why do we always have to be strong?
Exactly. And, you know, I feel like, don't get me wrong, my resilience and my strength and my mom's strength got me through seeing some shit.
Yeah.
Babe, like as a child, I seen some shit. Stuff that I will never repeat.
Yeah.
You know, out of just respect for my mom. But I seen some stuff that mentally would impact on anybody.
Yeah.
So I'm proud of her resilience and I'm proud of mine. But at the same time, we need to also be allowed, because that's it really, isn't it?
Talk to me a little bit about Dragon's Den.
Oh, why?
Why? Dragon's Den is the first time I'm introduced to you.
Was it?
Yeah, the first time because I saw the advert and I was just like, wow, didn't know this existed. Went onto your website, purchased a few bottles and have been using the brand ever since. Gave birth to my daughter, she uses the brand, and then we get to link back and work with you on a campaign. But what made you
go on Dragon's Den?
Yeah. Where does that start?
So, I read a book that year, 2020. I read a book called The Year of Yes by Shonda Rhimes.
Yes.
And in the book, Shonda talks about the importance of not talking yourself out of any possible opportunity on the journey of your becoming, on the journey to your greatness, right? And I was watching Dragon's Den, the previous season, and you know it comes up at the end of every episode with the advertisement, if you're an entrepreneur, right? So
apply here.
So I was like, yes. If you're an entrepreneur and you think you could be on the show, apply for Dragon's Den. So I was like, you know what?
I'm gonna do it.
I'm gonna do that, right? So I submitted my application, went online. I think that night, actually,
Really?
that night I was like, yes. And I went online and I submitted my application, and I didn't think anything of it. I was like, it's not gonna happen. They're sure to get thousands of these applications. And that, I believe, was, and I said 2020, it was 2019, forgive me, it was late 2019. So in the January 2020, I received a phone call from I think it was the producer or the talent acquisition team. And they said, okay, we've read your application, we like it, we want you to come in. So I went through, I think it's like a 3 or 4 step process.
So it's quite lengthy.
It's quite lengthy. It's quite lengthy. So there's the application, there's an over the telephone interview. Then following that, you had to go in and do a recording and an interview. And then following that, they do an assessment of you. And then they tell you whether or not you're going to be in the den with very short notice. And this was during COVID as well. So I actually went in the den in October of 2020.
How much notice did they give you?
To go in the den?
Yeah.
Whew, I think it was going in the den. I think it was something like 3 or 4 weeks.
Oh, wow.
So it weren't a long...
To get your whole shit together.
I had to get my shit together. Right? And what I always find really interesting about Dragon's Den is once you're there in the den, you realize how different it is from what you guys see on TV. You know what I mean? It's so different. First of all, I was in that den for around 2.5 hours. So you guys see my 15-minute segment, if that. Like 2.5 hours, I was getting grilled about every aspect of the business, of myself, of my journey. And you know, the day, I've never shared this publicly, but when I came out of the den, I remember phoning my partner and I was like, I didn't do a good job. I was like, I didn't represent. And that's another thing, there's this feeling that I have to represent, I have to be good, I have to change the narrative. And then I didn't know whether or not they would air my segment until I think 2 or 3 weeks before they aired it.
Are you kidding?
Yeah, because there's also a possibility that they won't air your segment.
Oh, wow.
Because it's about TV, it's entertainment, right? So, you know, in the den, many of you seen that I accepted the offer for investment, but I actually turned it down.
You didn't take it, Cam?
I didn't take it.
Why?
I didn't take it.
Not the right offer?
It wasn't the right offer. And I felt that, and these are my feelings and my opinions, but I felt that the offer wouldn't enable me to grow the business in the way that I wanted to. Right. When I looked at the contract, I felt as though there were a lot of restrictions on me as an individual and as a founder, and for that amount of money, I didn't see how I would be able to navigate those restrictions and expand the business in the way that I wanted to.
That's interesting.
So I turned it down. And there's lots of different types of finance, and that's another thing that in our community we're not exposed to the various ways in which we can get finances and resources into the business, right? So then I just looked at grant funding and you know, different things to help to support the trajectory of the business, and managed to, you know, exceed my first year's projections in terms of the revenue. And we secured listings with obviously national retailers. We sold the brand to international customers, and we've become one of the forerunners in the black hair care space in the UK. In terms of a hair care brand.
Big up.
So and that a lot of that was due to the exposure of being on TV. You can't pay for that level of marketing.
Absolutely.
Right. The amount, listen to me, when that show aired, you say you went on the website.
I was waiting for a while.
The website crashed.
I can imagine. The backlog of orders and stuff.
I weren't ready, me not ready.
No
I
way.
weren't ready. And I thought I was ready, you know. I weren't ready. Right.
So what are your emotions feeling? The website crashes. Are you like overjoyed or are you nervous?
I'm like ratted. Can I say that? I'm like, Lord God. And it's like I'm getting friends and family. I'm like, we gotta get these orders out, and we gotta. And it was a point in my business journey where I look back at that version of myself, because I'm constantly growing, right? So that business version of me wasn't as business savvy as I am now. There's a lot of things that I would have done significantly differently to really maximize that exposure on that opportunity. Right, I dropped the ball.
Tell me three things you would have done differently.
Jesus, I would have definitely implemented a more robust digital marketing process before the show aired. So I would have had my top funnel, middle funnel, lower funnel. That would have been absolutely sorted. I would have done email campaigns. I would have done retargeting. All of these things I'd worked with. Again, it was a very young digital marketing agency. So I was young, they was young, and there was just a lot of things that we missed out on. Nevertheless, we managed to acquire a lot of long lifetime customers through that exposure and that opportunity, and then it just propelled us like this, you know. And we overnight, literally overnight, we were six figures.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what's running through your mind, Cam, at that point? Do you? Because I know a lot of entrepreneurs get giddy, but you don't strike me as somebody that gets giddy.
What do you mean by giddy?
So a lot of people, if that happened to a lot of people, it'd be like, right, holiday, let's do this, let's take the family out for.
No, sir. Who's got time for? No, sir. No, I ain't got time for no holiday. One, my vision of me is starkly different to where I am now. Like the woman that I want to become, and I'm on the journey to becoming that person, requires me to be focused, laser focused. She requires me to be strategic. She requires me to be analytical. She requires me to be creative and not get distracted, and to expand and to read and continuously grow. And that money had to be reinvested in order for me to do that. And that's the thing as well. You have to make such a lot of money in business to make money, you know. People don't realize that.
It's the take home.
It's the take money.
The revenue is not the take home.
The revenue is the revenue and out. You know, so as much as we've done like a significant amount of revenue in that time span, I gotta buy more product now. I've got to pay for ads now. I've got to pay for a team and all of this, and you know, logistics, all of that.
That's right.
It's coming out. You know, there's loss making.
Yeah.
Right.
This is the part we don't talk
people
about,
don't
right?
talk about it. A lot of people's like, oh, you got a 6-figure business. I do.
Yeah.
And I'm so proud of that. But it takes a lot to become profitable.
So much. And I was talking about this with somebody yesterday. The idea that we set up companies and we birth things to solve a problem and it benefits our beneficiaries and our customers. Yes, amen. But we can often lose ourselves in that why.
Yeah.
And it's something that had to slap me in the face most recently. And I was like, I'm impacting all these people with this thing, but I don't feel impacted.
I feel tired.
I'm tired. I'm tired. I'm almost burnt out. So I had to change and shift who became first.
Yeah.
And it was no longer the customers, they were second.
Yeah.
And my why and why I wanted to start the company had to become first again.
Yeah.
Because we get lost in that, people giving us validation. You're doing amazing, oh my gosh, I see what you're doing. And in your head, you're like, girl, if you only knew.
And also, I think, for me, there's an importance of pouring back into yourself.
100%.
Whatever that looks like, right? Because burnout is real.
Yeah.
You get to a point where you're like, I can't.
Burnout stops you. Right?
Burnout is real. So there was a point in my business journey a couple of years ago where I was like, right, I'm part of this 5 a.m. club, right?
You won.
5 a.m. club, right? I read the book, right? Okay, right. 5 a.m. So I started waking up at 5 a.m., right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, right, but I didn't
How
take
did
into
that go?
consideration that I'm going to bed at 12, right? So
5 hours sleep. Yeah.
didn't go well, right?
And a household to manage.
And a household and kids and
kids.
bills and
Yeah.
the other business that I'm running,
Yeah.
right? So it's like, this is not sustainable. And then I read another book, which is, I've got a few life-changing books. So for me, The Year of Yes, life-changing book. And Matthew Walker's Why We Sleep,
Okay.
life-changing book, life-changing. And in that book, even though I don't implement it as much as I should, and I hold on to that, he talks about sleep from a very deep, multifaceted science perspective.
Right.
And understanding how important it is for productivity, for longevity, for happiness, for joy, for comprehension, for your cognitive ability, right? So, I'm on a journey to prioritizing more sleep.
And it's important.
And it's important. But I also learned in that book that there's a very small amount of people. So in business, there's a saying that you sleep when you're dead.
Right.
Keep going, keep going, keep going.
I don't like that.
But there's a very small amount of people who are very successful, but in terms of their circadian rhythm, they just don't require a lot of sleep.
Right.
95% of the population do. We require.
Are you part of that 95%?
Absolutely.
So the 5 a.m. club wasn't working for you?
It weren't working for me, right? 7,
Yeah.
my natural rhythm.
Yeah, for
I'm ready
sure.
to go. 5,
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, there are some times where I need to do a project where I know, okay, I've got to get up early, I've got to be somewhere, I've got to do something. But it's looking at, if I've done one of those nights where I've burnt myself at this end of the candle and I've stayed awake and I'm falling asleep at my laptop, if it's been one of them nights, it certainly ain't going to be a 5 a.m. morning.
Sure.
Right, I've got to give myself that time to recoup.
And what does juggling motherhood and business look like for you, Cam? It's something that I'm still trying to wrap my head around.
Yeah.
And I think I'm just winging it.
Yeah.
So what does juggling that look like for you? Have you managed to find a rhythm that works?
I love that. a rhythm. Because I was expecting you to say the typical thing. Have you managed to find a balance?
And there's no balance.
There's no balance.
Damn balance.
There's no blasted balance. What balance?
Yeah, does
I
it exist?
never got it like that ever. Right? So, and I think I'm going to keep that because it's a rhythm.
Yes.
Right? Sometimes I am 80% focused on my children.
Yeah.
20% on my business.
Got it.
And sometimes I'm 90% of my business and I'm like, Blasty Pitney.
Yes, I can relate.
Or in a way that probably others will understand. It's time to go to nanny's now.
Yes,
right? You know what I mean? That part. So it's like I've accepted that there's no balance. It's a rhythm, and it's okay because my children. My daughter came to me the other day, out the blue, and she said, "Mom, I'm so proud of you." Wow. She was like, "You're such an amazing mom." And do you know people in school know who I am?
I love that.
You know, people ask me if I'm the Nylah girl. And she was like, "You're doing a good job."
That's so
and
wholesome.
I needed that at that moment. You're doing a good job.
If from anybody, from your daughter.
You know, and I must also talk about my son.
Yeah.
So a lot of people don't know I have two. And Nylah gets all the limelight, and my son's starting to be like. But my son he's amazing. He's fantastic. He's 7. He's so super intelligent. Like this little boy is so intelligent and sensitive, and it's nurturing them. Like I see myself as their shepherd. I see myself as I think a lot of parents, and as this is where my careers advice kicks into play, and I hope I'm rambling, but I see a lot of parents, they have a desire for what they want their children to be. Like, I want you to be a doctor, I want you to be a pharmacist, especially in the environment that I've worked. I want my children to be the best versions of themselves.
Right. Above all.
What is the best possible version of you? And in order for you to be the best version of you, my job is to learn you.
Right.
Does that make sense?
100%.
So I'm constantly learning my children. I'm watching them, their nuances. Where do they shine? What are they good at? What do they naturally gravitate to? So I can start to pull that out. Where are your weaknesses? Do you know, what does that look like? What are you not that good at? So I don't push that on you, but I look at how I can turn those weaknesses and help them to become areas of strength, or help you to navigate them, right? So my daughter...
So good.
For example, Nylah is super creative. She loves drama, she loves socializing, she loves all of those things. So I recognize that although academics are very important, I can't burden you with academia.
Right.
If that makes sense.
It's not her bag.
It's not your bag.
Yeah.
And that's okay, because there's loads of people who are super creative and super successful. And if I say you have to sit down and do homework for hours and hours a day, that's going to burden you.
Yes.
Because it's not your flow. It's going to knock you off your kilter and your rhythm.
And you want her to stay in flow,
and I want her to shine. And I want her to stay in her flow. And I want her to stay in her greatness.
Yeah.
My son, however... super academic. That's his flow. Here's some books, here's some reading material. For my daughter, it's let's get you in drama school. Do you know what I mean?
For sure.
And I think as for me and my partner, what we've decided as parents is we're going to help them to navigate the journey of becoming themselves until we can hand that responsibility over to them.
Wow. And what's the age gap between them, Cam?
6 years.
How did you find that?
Because I weren't going to go again.
Really?
Yeah.
You were adamant, I've got the one and I'm happy with the one. Yeah.
Done. And then she was like, can I have a brother? Can I have a sister? Can I have...
Did you feel a pressure in that?
Yeah.
Yeah, you did.
I felt, and I'll tell you why I felt a pressure. Because I know what my relationship's like with my brothers.
Okay. Good.
I have brothers.
Yeah, that got you back.
I love my brothers. And I would say, again, because of my childhood, I've got a very motherly role to my brothers.
Yes.
But I know that if all else fails,
they got you back.
We've got each other.
And how many do you have?
I've got 2 brothers that I grew with. I'm going to talk about my dad.
Yeah.
But I got 2 brothers.
Yeah.
I got 2 brothers that I grew with.
I love that.
And I wanted her to have that type of relationship.
That bond.
That bond, that we went through this together. We grew together. We experienced childhood together.
And there's something beautiful about a brother and sister bond. I've got a brother. He's 7 years younger than me, but he thinks he's my older brother. Yeah, that's just what it is. But now, coming out on the other side of that trauma, we sit down and have some deep reasoning. Yeah. And it's so wholesome that we've got to that end of it where we can sit down and be like, bro, how has that impacted you? And he's like, you know what, I'm in therapy now. And it's just so, it's everything that I didn't think I needed, but I did, if that makes sense.
Exactly. So I wanted her to have that companion.
Yeah. That friend.
So I was like, all right, sure.
So did you plan your second one?
Yes.
You did?
We did. We did. And he's a beautiful, beautiful blessing.
Any more?
No, sir.
No. You done?
Done.
2's enough. 3's a crowd.
Yeah.
What would you say has been your biggest accomplishment to date?
Beating the stats.
In what respect?
According to recent statistics, 0.02% of black women in the UK get VC funding. 0.34% in the USA. So it's pretty low.
Small margins.
Really ridiculously low.
Yeah.
Needs to change. But I beat the stats. And out of all of my accomplishments, securing my recent investment it's up there.
Yeah.
It's really up there. Yeah, I would say. From a personal and selfish perspective, that's my biggest accomplishment and what I'm most proud of, because that was not easy. And everything I read told me how difficult it was going to be. And not only was it going to be difficult just generally, because of my demographic and the fact that in the funding landscape, women are underestimated. Yeah. And then black women even more underestimated. 100%. So developing a proposition.
I love how you smile when you talk about it.
I get a bit geeky. Yeah. But yeah, like that's dope.
That's lit.
That's lit.
And what does the investment allow you to do? Allow you to change?
Oh my God. Bring in the team, right?
That you need.
Because I spoke earlier about me believing that I can learn anything. And that got me to this point. Yeah. But as much as it got me to this point, it kept me here. Because there's only so much I can do. Yeah. Right? I can learn it or I can implement it. Yeah. Does that make sense? 100%. You can't do both simultaneously, if that makes sense. Right. And the learning takes time. Yeah. It takes time. So if I'm put in a position where I have to dig myself out of some shit, I'm going to dig myself out of it. I'm going to struggle. I'm going to hustle. For the first time, I feel like the hustle is different. Like, I still have to hustle. I still have to grind, but the hustle's going to be different.
Is it on a more strategic level?
It's going to be definitely more strategic, because now I can sit in my essence and my power of creativity, of innovation, of recognizing the need and implementing solutions where I'm in flow. Right? And where I am weaker, I can bring in strategic team members to support in the implementation and execution of my vision.
Amen. So you can sit in CEO.
I can sit in CEO mode, as humble as ever, because I have so much to learn from the people I'm going to surround myself with. I
love that.
You know?
How exciting. So excited, so excited, and so deserving as well.
You.
And this is the element of business that I love to talk about. I don't like to talk with founders who are like, yeah, I do it all. I'm like, yeah, that's not where we should strive to be long term.
Yeah.
We want to build sustainable organizations where if you want to take 5 months holiday, Cam, you absolutely can, and step back into something that is still operationally excellent.
Exactly. I need to create a system that's not dependent upon me
100%.
As the founder. That's a business that can run in your absence and run well, right?
And it's so hard,
isn't
it?
Yeah. But my long-term vision is to create an opportunity for me to now give back in a meaningful way.
Right.
Does that make sense? Like, I want to come back into environments that I was raised in and identify little girls like me who don't quite fit in and say, you don't fit in because you were born to stand up.
Yes.
How can I help you do that? But this period of my journey and my becoming is focus. So that she can do that.
Amen.
That makes sense.
100%. What's next for you? Not the business, you.
I am on a personal path of joy.
Wow.
And happiness is different to joy. Happiness is fleeting. Happiness is external. Joy
is deep within.
I'm on a path of connecting with the source of existence. I'm not religious.
Yeah.
But there's something bigger than me.
Yeah.
And I'm part of that. And I want to connect with that. I want to develop a really strong relationship with that. And the constant improvement. Because I think that, I don't think I'm special. In that I don't think I'm better than anybody. But what I do think is that we were all created for purpose.
Yeah.
And I want to uncover and flow and become my purpose.
Wow.
If that makes sense.
100%. And I ask all my guests to do this. Can you leave the audience with one nugget? It could be about anything.
Could be about anything. I've got so much to say. What I will say is to all of the women, all the men, because I think sometimes the needs of men are also really overlooked. But if you're in a space where you're not feeling joy, and you're not feeling fulfilled, and you're not feeling genuinely satisfied with where you are now, sit with that experience that feeling without distraction, and then write what it is that you want to become. What do you want to be? Because I say to people, you design yourself.
Yeah.
So write what you want to become, and then the steps you need to take to get there. And become it. Because you have the capacity and the power to. That's what I'll say.
Cam, thank you.
So sorry.
Thank you. I could sit here all day. That was absolutely beautiful. Thank you so much.